Hi, everyone. How are you doing? I'm Kate Titus from A Loyal Companion. It's good to have you here today. And thank you for joining us for the self care for the grieving pet parent today. I really enjoy the fact that we're able to provide this kind of information as a person who has lost many dogs, usually in the month of November. I think I've lost three or four in November. Um, I remember how hard it was to get through that first holiday season without having my dog. So we talked about it here and at A Loyal Companion, and we decided that this would be a good way to give back to those folks. We can no longer help your dog, but maybe we can help you through the loss of your pet. So really glad to have you here. Thank you for taking some time out of your afternoon. First thing I want to do is I want to bring on our guest today. Her name is Jennifer Titley Rubio, and she was a client or is a client of mine, and I work with her dog Oso. And let me bring Jennifer into the stream here. All right, there's Jennifer.
Hi.
I'm going to pop you up a little closer. There we go. So this is Jennifer. I'm very happy to work with her, and she's been great to talk to through our sessions with her dog Oso. Let me tell you a little bit more about Jennifer. She is a native Tucsonan. And she grew up amongst many dogs and cats. She has a master's in biology from the U of A and a master's of social work through ASU. We won't hold that against you. She's worked in mental health, schools, and hospice, and right now she's working as a bereavement counselor for Casa de la Luz Hospice and is a certified grief educator. She and her husband have raised many dogs and cats and two children. And I think we've talked about this before. But her favorite quote is that I believe that losing one's beloved animal is a very special kind of loss and grief, which often goes unrecognized by our culture. It's my intention to hold space, companion, and bring solace to the bereaved. So I am so happy that you are with us today, Jennifer. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. It's really great.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about obviously self care and grieving for the grieving pet parent today. If for those of you who have joined us, if you feel comfortable, we'd love for you to share a photo of your beloved pet and their name in the chat window if you'd like. I am going to start that and put my dog's names in here. And I'd love for you guys to do the same. And then Jennifer is gonna start our talk today, and we're going to start with a couple of poems. Is that right? Is that right, Jennifer?
Yeah, quote and one part of a poem. Yes.
Okay, great. So go ahead and do that. I'd love to see that.
So I'm going to start with some of you may have heard this before, a French poet from the 1980s, 1890s, I should say. Until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened. That's Anatole France. And then some of you may be familiar with this poem by Rudyard Kipling, The Power of the Dog. And I'm just going to recite one stanza of that poem because I think it's pretty important. When the body that lived at your single will, with its whimper of welcome is stilled, how still? When the spirit that answered your every mood is gone, wherever it goes for good, you will discover how much you care and will give your heart to a dog to tear. I think that just gets at us.
Yeah,
so,
that is incredible. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know that if you're here, you're in pain and suffering and lost a dog. So I want to thank all of you for coming, and I want to welcome you, and I also want to welcome your grief. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that grief comes with us wherever we go, especially during the holiday season. It's my goal to give you some validation about your loss as a pet loss, give some education about what grief is, some ideas about things to do when you're grieving that might be helpful, and maybe some ideas for the holidays and anniversaries and those special days, which can just like trigger us a little bit. So I'd like to start by, I just want to ask you guys to just maybe like hold your heart for a little bit, and I want you to breathe. We're just going to do a real quick breathing in and out. And I just want you to think of your special animal that you lost, your dog. And we're going to dedicate today, this hour, to your dog. And with that, I want you to light your candle that I asked you all to bring, and then just say the name of your dog out loud, who brought you here today. We're just going to leave that candle lit while we do our lesson, our class. And this could even be a special dog maybe who hasn't died but is suffering and may be on the way. I'll tell you, this morning I ended up at the emergency vet and saw several dogs on their way to being euthanized, and I felt so sad, and kind of put today in perspective for me. So I'd like to read a poem, and this is a poem by Donna Ashworth, and then I promise I just have one more poem at the end. This is called Feathers. I left you a little white feather. I placed it right there in your way. I wrapped it in love with a message to let you know you'll be okay. I drew you a colorful rainbow. It followed your car for a while. I made it a beautiful rainbow. I hoped it would show me your smile. I flew down a beautiful robin. It landed right there on your ledge. I prayed he would give you the strength to push yourself back from the edge. I try every day to remind you that I never did go away. The feathers, the rainbows, the robins are my way of trying to stay. So in starting today, I would like to give you the very first trick or piece about grief is to give yourself permission to grieve. That is probably the single most important thing that you're going to hear today, which is allow yourself permission to hear, to listen, to feel, to be present with your grief. So I think next I'd like to talk a little bit about validating what a pet loss is. And I think that if you are here today, you already know that you're in pain. And that is what validating pet loss is, because our culture doesn't always necessarily recognize grief very well. And then when you add pet loss on top of that, people who don't have relationships with animals just don't necessarily understand what grief is about if you've lost an animal. And grief, whether it's a human loss or an animal loss, has to do with the relationship that you had with that animal or with that person, and just the connection you have, and that's what where the pain is coming from. And there's research studies also that have validated that pet loss is as significant as a human loss. And there's a link we gave you to who's our chaplain, wrote it down over here. It's there's a website that we're linking you to, which is called Sarah Bowen, and her website is Sacred Sendoffs, and there are links on that website that we've given you, which will have information about the research studies about that. The other thing about pet loss is that I think a difficult piece about pet loss is that people do not understand and know what to tell you. And there's theories about the people who are out there who are your friends, that there will be like divided into thirds. A third of the people will care for you, but just not know what to say. Like, oh, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Let me know if I can do anything. And then you don't hear from them again. And then there's a third of the people who will want you not to grieve and don't want to see you suffer. And they will kind of knock you off your grief path. And so those are just people to be aware of, that maybe you don't want to spend a lot of time with them. And then there's that last third, which can be those people who really do care and who are willing to sit with you, be present with you, not judge you, allow you to cry, bring you Kleenex, bring you soup, do whatever it is to just be present with you and companion you in your grief. Those are the people you want to look out for to be your buddies. And I've talked with other people, and sometimes I say, I think it's 50-50. So just whatever you perceive that to be, just think about that a little bit. And people say the stupidest things, like, it's just a dog. Like, do they, like, you still have another one, like, right? Or why don't you just get another dog? It's not like you lost your mom, brother, sister, dad, uncle, grandparent. And it's not about comparing grief. You can't compare grief. It's like what you have is a love for an animal and a connection and the pain of not having that animal anymore. That's a piece of what grief is.
Excellent. That's I love that the 1/3 listing that you've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty fantastic because you see a lot of people who just don't get it, or maybe they don't know who their tribe is. And I think knowing who that 1/3 that you can go to is just so important to get you through, through the really, really difficult times. And I think one of the there are instances, right, where the most painful thing about losing your dog comes up. And, who do you, in fact, I don't know if anybody, whoever is listening, if you could just add a couple of words in the chat and tell us what was the most difficult part, the most painful part of losing your dog. Like for me, it was about routine and knowing I was taking a lot of care of Harley and Kahlua at the end. And it was almost like I didn't have that. And there was a lightness to it because it was a whole lot less responsibility, but there was also guilt that went with that lightness. And for me, that was one of the most difficult parts of losing those two particular dogs. So if you feel moved and would like to post a comment about that, we'd love for you to do that, and some of the things that you had talked about, Jennifer, about the constant companion, your best friend. Can you talk more about those kind of issues?
Well, what's painful are the relationships that we have with our animals. So if your animal was your best friend, you no longer have that best friend, that companion. They provided us unconditional love. There were no strings attached. It was somebody you could be. Anybody you wanted to be, in that animal will just still continue to love you. It can mark a significant period of time in our lives. It may be a reminder or a connection to somebody you had during that period of time. So there's sort of like a historical connection sometimes with an animal. They may have gotten us through a specific illness, a death, a loss, a separation, a divorce, cancer. They may be the only living being that we felt safe with, that we
Mhm.
could trust. They may be our protector. We feel safe at home when we know there's a dog there that's going to bark if someone comes in the door. It may be like your family member. You may be living alone, and that is the other beating heart in your house. And you come home to a house where there's no longer another beating heart. It's hard. They may be something that took us outside to get physical. They may have been part of our health routine, like they were something that we did
Yeah.
twice a week, walking our dog outside in the morning, at night when we came back from work. And
Mhm.
then there's just what Kate mentioned, is that there's like the other losses that are kind of attached to that. Maybe we socialized at the dog park. Maybe we had connections with people when we were walking with our dog. Maybe it took us out into the park and we got to watch soccer on a Saturday afternoon. So they're just the other things that we would do that connected us to our animal are also losses that affect us in our lives.
And you talked a little bit about people not knowing the right things to say, or will say things that just make you cringe, and that a lot of that is cultural. That we don't really know what to do with death. You know, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, our in doing grief counseling with people, it's really apparent that our culture doesn't know how to manage death, hospice death, and also grief after death loss. And so there are a lot of people that just kind of walk around and are in kind of a fog, not really knowing what to do because there's not a lot of support. And lots of other cultures have lots of rituals, and there's lots of things that people do when somebody has died. And I'm kind of getting lost here, Kate, but
No, you're doing fine.
okay. Um, well, even just thinking, like, we get 5 days bereavement. Most people that work in any kind
Mhm.
of agency, that's like nothing. Like 5 days barely gets you in and out of the mortuary, literally. If it's a human being
Mhm.
you've lost, and then you still have all the pain and suffering, because when you first lose somebody or an animal, you're in a state of shock.
Mhm.
So it's like those 5 days just cover initial numbness, nothing else. And so
Right.
our culture doesn't really celebrate death. They don't celebrate the different ways people suffer. It's yeah.
It can be, and it's almost like it can be broken down into like little sections. So those first days are really just about the numbness and the shock, and the unreality, and the new reality that we're now stepping into, right? Um, and I think especially when we're dealing with animals that are euthanized, that adds a whole different layer that if you lose a grandmother, let's say, um, euthanasia is not very common for humans, although it is legal in a few states. But you've made the decision to end the life, so there's a whole nother layer of stuff to get through on that, and that rabbit hole and those landmines that go along with it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I was talking about before about those first few days of that numbness, the shock, the unreality, and then just there's such a big, strong disbelief that the animal has died, like it's actually gone.
Mhm.
And with euthanasia, it's all of those decisions. Like, did I make the right decision? Did I do it soon enough? Did I wait too long? Was I doing it for me? Did I suffer? Did the animal suffer? Did I
Mhm.
suffer? But so there's a lot of guilt that can be attached to that. And a lot of the thoughts that can really trip us up are those what if only, I wish I had. And those,
Mhm.
you can just perseverate in your brain with those thoughts, to a point where you're not functional, if that's the
Yeah.
way your mind works. And so the important thing to realize with that is that you're not a superhero. You can't
Mhm.
go back in time. You can't change things. You didn't, 2020's hindsight is 2020, right? You don't know what could have been. And you have to always just trust that you made the best decision you could at the time. And I think the other thing that I think is really important is that in your heart that you made that decision because you loved your animal,
Yeah.
and you made the best decision you could at the time. So you have to end up forgiving yourself for any choices you're beating yourself up about. But just know that you'll circle around to that quite a few times, and just
Mhm.
recognize it, notice it, and go, oh, I'm here again. It's another rabbit hole, and just like let it go as best as you're able.
Mhm.
Which kind of moves into grief is real. Grief is a real thing, and there have been research papers and studies about it. And grief affects your brain. There's a psychologist at the University of Arizona, Mary Frances O'Connor, has written
Mhm.
a book called The Grieving Brain. You can find lots of her links online to listen to her speak about it. And they have uh, studies where they study the plasticity of your brain and how your brain is connected. And when you're attached to something out of love, it changes the shape and the way your brain works. So when that is missing, it you're off kilter. You're not functioning correctly because your brain's not functioning as a whole anymore. It's got some missing pieces in it, kind of like missing puzzle pieces, which is like the love and affection and care. I'm really simplifying this, guys, but the love and care that you have for your animal is missing, and it will make you feel like you are going crazy. And because
Mhm.
grief gets really physical, it can
Mhm.
be brain fog, where you're just kind of walking around numb, not knowing what you're doing, your loss of sleep, your diet may go haywire, you too much, not enough, memory issues,
Mhm.
nightmares. All of these things are very normal when you're grieving. And so, which is one of the reasons it suggested that people, I had initially thought 1 year, but I read somewhere else that said 2 years. Don't make any major decisions until
Mhm.
you're about at least 1 or 2 years out from the loss of a deep grief.
Yeah, and I think considering, one of the things people will say is, "Well, you need to get another dog to take care of your pain." And I'm not recommending that you wait 2 years to get another dog or another year, but you need to be mindful of where you are emotionally and whether you're ready to do that, whether you're ready to commit to another animal. One of the things that, my wife Kathy told me when we lost our dog Travis that helped me through the grief. And I'd only known the dog less than 2 years, and we lost him, and I was crushed. He'd become my that spirit that was helping me write. He was there. He was really helping open up another part of my life, and we lost him. And it wasn't sudden. He had liver cancer. We knew it was coming, But her great suggestion to me was the way to visualize this is that he left a Travis size hole in my heart that another dog would then walk through that hole that he made. And, being prepared for that, but not rushing into it because everyone tells you that's the way to do it. Being open to what your brain and your mind and your heart is telling you. And that, I think that kind of leads into the different emotions that we're going through. And, you're sad and you're angry and you're mad and all of that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
And yes, emotions are probably like the heart and soul of grief in the sense that you can get buried with your emotions, and they can be sad, mad, angry, guilty, relieved, tired, depressed, lonely, confused, just to name a few. And if you kind of picture a big ball of yarn that's kind of messed up and broken and messed up pieces, it's like we kind of want to think that we just go from here to here and we'll be done with grief, but instead it's like you're going to go like this,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you're going to kind of get over here to the other side, and then you might go back again and go through, because all of those feelings, it's important to be able to feel them, to process them and let go of them and move on. And the sadness can be so unexpected and can hit you anywhere. And actually have a word for it, stug. But it's a grief burst. And that means, like, say maybe you drive past a dog park and then all of a sudden you can't stop crying and you're in the car, and it was just seeing the dog park you used to go to a lot. Or maybe it's you happen to be at PetSmart to get something for another animal you may have, and you see your dog's favorite dog bone. These things that will just trigger you can be really painful, and just, try to be kind to yourself. That's the best you can
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm just going to mention again those what ifs and onlys and whys. I put this in here. I wanted to talk about that twice because I think those can also really trip us up. And especially if we're feeling guilty. Guilty is where a lot of those feelings will come through. One of the other grief specialists I talked to or learned from, I didn't talk to him, talks about 3 lanes. And he talks about, your lane is what you have control of. The other lane, so it would be your dog's lane. You don't have control over your dog and the fact that your dog got cancer, or that your dog died, or that was hit by a car, or just died of old age. You don't have control over that. So you only have control over your lane, and then your dog's lane, and then whatever you perceive a higher power to be is maybe their lane, and how that might impact your life. But pay attention to the fact that you only have control over your lane. And when you start feeling really lost in the rabbit holes, it's just keep perspective. You're not a superhero.
And then, we talked about grief not being linear. But what about as you start to feel a change in your relationship to that grief? And how you feel that your sadness may not last as long, or your grief bursts become less frequent. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's helpful to know that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. It isn't that you will ever not feel sad when you think about your dog, but you may not feel as sad as often, and you may not feel it for as long. So it's the intensity will become a little bit less, and the length of time you feel sad may feel a little bit less. And there may come a time where you may be able to look at a picture of your dog and smile.
Mhm.
There are subtle shifts that can happen, but and so that, and I share that, just to let you know that it will get better eventually.
Yeah, and they're like, once we get through to that where you're feeling a little bit better, or maybe you're not, would you say, like, uh, you're almost kind of learning to live again? You're learning to be a different person without that dog in your life? And I know that one of the things that, my wife and I have really believe, is that our animals tend to they become different animals, and they come back to tell us that they're okay. I don't know why, but all of my dogs have turned out to be birds. I don't know how that happened, but it did. Every time we see a heron at Fort Lowell Park, that's Harley coming to say hi to me. Every time we see a roadrunner, that's Dottie. Kahlua hasn't decided what she wants to be. I only had Kahlua for about 3 months as a foster. Travis, that we talked about earlier, he's a monarch butterfly. So whenever we see a monarch butterfly go by, we'll say, "Hey, Trav, how you doing?" But I think the other piece of that is that we did some things like donating some of his goods, or making a donation to PAC. We did a lot of those things in our dog's name, and I think that really helped to move that along. Do you have any other ideas along that?
Yeah, and that kind of just goes with learning who you are without your dog and trying to find meaning out of the loss. And so those are like things that you can do. Dedicate a bench. Don't, what Kate said, donate stuff to PAC or the Humane Society. You can plant a tree, create a photo album. I have a photo album of all my animals who died. Donate books to PAC. Draw, paint, write a poem. That's why poets are poets. They write about what they feel. Painting.
It doesn't have to be amazing. It just has to be yours.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So we've talked a lot about kind of what grief is, and needing to take care of ourselves through this process. So can we shift over a little bit and talk more about finding that support, and in ways that you can take care of yourself, and what you need to go through?
Yeah.
Okay.
So grief is physical, right? And so a lot of things that happen is your body is like really stressed out, high stress. So think about the fact that you have to consider that you're taking care of yourself. Like you're your own puppy, like you got to take care of yourself. So it's physical, emotional, mental, cognitive, social, spiritual. And so think about all of those areas that you want to reach and try to nurture and take care of. On the link, we're giving you a link to Kristen Neff's website, who does self-compassion exercises. I'd suggest you listen to one of those and just nurture yourself and think about taking care of yourself. And I'm giving you an article on how to be kind to yourself while grieving. So physically, you want to take care of yourself. If you walk, stretch, move, try to get enough sleep, slow down, relax, rest. Emotionally, you want to reach out to people who can listen to you, be with you in your pain. This is emotional, so do what you do to take care of yourself. If it's listening to music, if it's singing in the shower, it's okay to cry. Crying is great. Laugh. You can laugh. It's still okay to laugh. Schedule something that gives yourself pleasure every day. Just be gentle with yourself. Cognitively, write lists. It's like you're going to be a little bit foggy. So be gentle with yourself. Write lists so you don't forget what you need to do. Don't make major changes. Meditate, breathe, admire beauty, admire colors. There's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise I'm just going to share with you really quick, which is a really nice grounding exercise. If you feel like you're really distraught and distracted, it's 5 things. You say 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things that you feel in your body. Then you say 2 things that you smell, and then 1 thing you taste. And so you just take your time, sit down and do that. And what that does, it just brings you presently into your body, and kind of can help you if you're feeling really stressed out. Socially, you're going to want to try to stay related to the people that you can connect to, that third who are going to be available to you, who can accept your grief. And recognize that some of your friendships might change. Some of those people in the first group may come back, but they might not be the people you need right now. Find a grief buddy. Find somebody else who maybe understands what you're going through, can understand that. And then spiritually, do what fits for you. Some of the things that have been really helpful for me were to create a sacred mourning space. I would make a little altar, and I put pictures and things that my animals were special for my animals. You can start each day with a meditation, a prayer, an intention. Visit, go outside, and imagine your animal at peace. That's a really, really good one. And then something that really helps a lot are rituals. And I'm going to quote a woman named Tracy Wallace here and saying, death rituals are incredibly helpful for giving us a feeling of increased sense of control over a situation in which we have none at all. And for many, that feeling helps us give meaning to one of the most difficult but most natural events in our lives. So doing anything with intention to memorialize or remember your dog, it helps you find meaning in the loss. And that can be as simple as lighting a candle and saying their name today. It can be putting their picture up, next to you and looking at them at night and saying good night.
Yeah, that's I love the maybe continuing rituals that you had before you lost your dog. So whenever I would go to bed every night, I would tell Harley, good night, my sweet prince. And after he died, I missed that. It was one of those things that you do. It's part of your life. And I've gotten to the point where, if I go to bed, I have a picture of him in my office. It's right by my workspace, and I have to walk by it to go to bed. I'll just whisper to him, good night, my sweet prince. And that, I feel a closeness, and it's pretty amazing when you do that. And if you're comfortable and you're ready to do that, it doesn't have to be painful. It can be like a fleece blanket that you just kind of wrap around you, right? And could I ask you to go back and talk a little bit more about the grief buddy? So, yeah, and what you need from that buddy, because you may be able to tell that person what you need, because you don't need them to talk, you need them to listen.
Yeah, you need there's a really good link for giving you to Megan Devine's website where it talks about how to help someone who's grieving. So that's a really great link. I would suggest you listen to it and then share it with your friends. But the piece of it is that you need somebody who could either have experienced a loss as painful as yours, who knows what you're going through, who's able to just sit and be with you, so that if you're crying, they're okay with you crying, and they're just going to go, I know this hurts. I'm with you. I understand. I may not completely know what you're feeling, but I get that you're really sad. Just someone who can be with you or be present with you when you're having your animal euthanized, or, just those people that you can trust to be with you. I went with my sister when she euthanized one of her last dogs. She's suffered in a way. She's chosen not to have another dog, but it was just to be there. You're just holding someone's hand. You're not trying to fix them. You're not trying to make them better. You're just trying to honor their grief loss.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes quiet is better than talking, because you don't need words. You need an ear a lot of times. And who among your group can provide that and is willing to provide that. And can share with you in a compassionate way in this period. So what we talked a little bit about the size of your grief, and the relationship to love.
Yeah, well, it's like you really have to know that why it hurts so much is because you loved that much. So the size of your grief is the size of your love. So when you're feeling really sad, it's because you really, really loved your animal. Like if you can own that and know that, it's an honor. Grief is an honor, to a certain extent, because of how much you loved your animal. It's not, and I like this quote by Rabbi Earl Grolman: grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. It's the price you pay for love. The only cure for grief is to grieve.
That is so true. And it's, there's a saying that you can't go around grief. You have to go through it. And you have to sit with it. You have to allow it to cover you, and then you work to remove it and become the new person that comes out the other side, right?
Yeah.
Because you're no longer with your animal at that point.
One of
So
the authors that Wolfeld has a book out. He talks about it as the wilderness of your grief.
mhm,
And basically, what you're doing as a buddy is that you're your companion to that person in the wilderness of their grief. You know, and it really is about unique. Your grief is unique to your experience of your loss, your experience of your relationship with the animal that died, and the thing about grief that also happens is that it piggybacks on to all of the previous losses you may have had, animal or living or human, as we meant to say, and throw inside of that COVID. so
yeah,
so the last few years you can have had a huge, you might be reacting stronger now than you might have had for maybe an animal you lost 10 years ago, and you may also be grieving for an animal you lost 10 years ago because it's touching you now. So
mhm.
grief is tricky.
And it's cumulative, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
every time you lose another pet or another loved one, let's just put it that way,
yeah,
when I lost Harley, I was grieving the loss of my mother all over again because I adopted him 4 months after I lost my mother.
hmm,
So he really, at some level, was my mother, and he was
right,
my connection to my mom. So when I lost him, that was another grief valley or another wilderness that I had to go through.
right,
And that
right,
becomes, a really big that becomes a huge challenge. It's not you don't grieve in a vacuum. Everything else is still going on around you.
right.
So speaking of not grieving in a vacuum, we are coming up on the holiday season. Do you have some ideas for us for how to get through the holidays, special days, anniversaries, things like that?
Yeah, and partly with that, as I would also like to suggest that you can do rituals. Rituals
Okay.
are a fantastic way to process, and we talked about that briefly, but I want to just also mention some ideas.
Okay.
So we talked about an altar, maybe a photo album. If you bury your animal or ashes, there's a headstone, a cement paw print, maybe a carved stick, like something that you might do to commemorate them in some special way. Maybe you have a special altar in your backyard. Maybe you planted a tree or a bush or something over. I have lots of cats buried in my backyard, so I'm always kind of cautious where I plant things. You can take the ashes to a special place, lighting a candle, saying their name, bringing a poem, a prayer, a picture, anything that will feel special to you. I think you mentioned taking something to something. Somebody mentioned taking tennis balls and donating them to a dog park.
Mhm.
And the Sacred Send-Offs website has ritual ideas on that as well. And we're sending you that
Yeah.
link. But the idea is that what's really helpful sometimes is to celebrate their life. Think
Mhm.
about their life and like remember their joy of their life.
And
And
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to say one thing that we've had folks that we've worked with for a very long time. They would bring in new toys
mm,
and or bags of tennis balls, and they would tell folks to take one in honor of their dog.
yeah,
Um, we have someone on here who did that for us, and it was people were so honored to take one of those tennis balls or one of those toys, and they actually stopped for a minute and just kind of held it against them and said, thank you. I know this is really special because it came from this person who was grieving the loss of their dog, but wanted to turn it into something positive and something special. So
yeah,
it can really make an impact on the people who receive your gift.
right, right.
Yeah. So, okay. So talk to us a little bit about those holiday ideas.
Holidays. I borrow a lot from lots of different grief specialists, and there's Refuge in Grief, which is Megan Devine's website. She talks about something about aim for peace of being rather than
Mhm,
holiday joy. And I think that is like if you can kind of cue in on that, is that you're trying to find peace,
mhm,
especially when you're grieving.
mhm,
So think about that. Plan ahead with any kind of anniversaries, because if you know that's an anniversary, you will know it on that day. And sometimes, if you can plan ahead what you're going to do and be prepared for it, it will keep you from being tripped up like unexpectedly,
mhm,
feeling a lot of grief. So
mhm,
plan for it. Um, think about any kind of new ritual you might want to do for yourself or your animal that, and maybe it's just something you always did. I mean, with people, sometimes they'll say, set a place at the table, and maybe you'll set the dog bowl underneath the table where their feet used to always get in your way or their head looking for food. So something that just reminds you of your dog, that keeps you connected to them, because you're still connected to them. They're just not physically there anymore.
Yeah.
So it's important to kind of recognize that.
Yeah, that's I love the setting the place. I think the visual of that is pretty powerful. That yeah, I mean they have a place in this holiday or this special day. It the way to keep it from being as painful is to make it positive and plan for it so it doesn't just slap you in the side of the face, right? That you're
Hmm.
prepared for that so it's not such
Yeah.
a grief bomb. What did you call them earlier? It's not a
It's a s-
um
it's a stug. I forget what that stands for.
yeah, it's just like a grief bomb that hits you from out of nowhere
Hmm.
that you're much more prepared for that. So if you celebrate Christmas and you had a stocking for your dog, which we do you hang it up? And maybe you fill it with things that you will then donate to another dog or to one of the rescues. Do you do that? Do you put their food bowl out? Do you put their water bowl out? I think, like you've said through this whole thing, it has to be something very personal and means something to you, right?
Yeah. I'll bet people even have ornaments with their dogs' names on it
Mhm.
that they maybe put on their trees as well.
Right. Yeah,
That's
that's
just,
that's awesome.
mhm.
So, you talk a little bit about having a physical space, and I know during the holidays that can be pretty hard, especially if you are hosting Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever, or birthdays, whatever it happens to be. How do you find that physical space? What are your recommendations for that?
This would be internal. I think you can have an internal space to go, like maybe
Okay.
you're gonna know that you're gonna need some space and time to yourself. And so it depends how busy your life is and how busy your home is. So can you just go and take a few minutes to be in your bedroom, and just kind of
Mhm,
recenter yourself and just adjust. And it could almost be a meditation of imagining yourself at a place where you felt really comfortable and safe.
mhm,
I like to imagine being at the beach, just a
mhm,
place where you maybe like to go that you feel comfortable at. So there's imagining a really comfortable place where you feel safe and secure and grounded, or even just going to a specific place. And if it's a place in your house that you feel comfortable at, if it's a place outside that you feel comfortable at, going up to Mount Lemon for a walk, just physically, it's nice to have a place where you can kind of escape to.
mhm.
It's
Okay.
also really important to just take care of yourself during the holidays to conserve your energy. It's
Mhm,
okay to say no. You don't have to go to every single holiday event that you get invited to. You can pick and choose. You can have an escape plan in mind. You
yep,
don't have to stay forever. You don't have to
mhm,
stay for the whole event. You can take 2 cars and bow out if you need to.
yep,
Things to think about. It's okay
yeah,
also to enjoy yourself.
yeah, that's
Some
a big
people,
one, that is so hard. That
yeah,
is so hard.
yeah, people feel guilty about feeling happy, when they're
Mhm,
still feeling sad at the same time. It's
mhm,
a um, it's a duality of feelings. It's okay to be grieving and also feel happy at the same time.
mhm,
It's really tricky, but that's a piece of that happens in grief as well.
right. So if you think about, try to put things in an "and" perspective instead of an "or" perspective,
Yep.
and you can have it doesn't have to be black or white. Nothing about grief is black or white, and it changes. Just like your dog changed while you were caring for them, if this has been a long-term, condition, their body changed over time. Guess what? Your body is changing over time.
Yeah.
So what I always tell people is take care of the dog that's in front of you. You need to do the same for yourself now. Take care of that person that's staring at you from the mirror,
Mhm.
because what you felt yesterday is going to be different than what you're going to feel today, and that's okay. And that's
Right.
part of this as part of this process.
Right.
Um,
So
so
along with that, it's like I have another little quote here. We can and often do feel more than one emotion. Embracing and thinking instead of either or thinking enables us to let more love, peace, joy, gratitude, and belonging in alongside vulnerability and grief. So that's
Mhm.
just knowing that you can be sad and angry. You can feel guilty and relieved. It
Mhm.
isn't either or. It's
Mhm.
just important to allow yourself to have all of it.
It absolutely is. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add for us? Because the other thing I wanna do is I wanna open it up maybe to some questions in the comment. We've got a few minutes left here, so if you have a question you'd like to ask Jennifer, please put it in the comments, and we'll pop it up on the screen here so we can all get the benefit from that. But do you have any other things you'd like to share with us?
I have one more poem. Would you like to hear
Okay.
that now?
You did promise a poem. Okay,
Oh,
let's do
yeah.
it.
This is by Joanne Cacciatore, who actually has a grief, is located in Sedona, Arizona, and does
Mhm.
stuff out there. This is my beloved friend, Grief. Dear grieving one, treat grief. Welcome her as you would a cherished friend, one who keeps your secrets and stays up all night with you, one who stands by you no matter what and holds your fearful hand to cross the street, one who reads with you books of lamentations and weeps with you through love songs and sunsets, which now are too sad for words. Such a friend is rare and irreplaceable. Such a friend is worthy of your tenderness and attention. Over time, you will see that grief softens her edges. Her eyes relax, her fists unclench. Once she trusts you with her heart and she feels safe, you will grow to know and love her back like few others. Treat grief as an old friend, and she will offer you respite from a meaningless life. It is not, of course, the life you loved and wished for and should have had. That life cannot return in this place in that way. And so grief, like a beloved friend, stands instead, waiting patiently for your readiness. Grief remembers, and this is the job of a beloved friend, walking with our heart gently in her hands, even when we wish we never knew her.
That was pretty powerful.
Yeah,
That's pretty amazing.
yeah.
I want to remind everybody that we have, if you want to pop your email address, I'm sorry, you want to send us a private message, pop your email address in there. We will send you the list of resources. And we also have a couple of booklets that Jennifer has found for us that we can email those over to you as well. There's some really good resources within those booklets as well. Um, so let me take this opportunity to thank you, Jennifer. Really, really appreciate your time and God, your expertise. It's been fantastic. I've enjoyed talking to you about this and sharing with other people. It feels better. We spend a lot of time talking during Oso's
Yeah,
swims
yeah.
and his gyms that about this kind of thing and I really appreciate you taking the time to do that and to be here with us today. Do you have a closing ritual or anything you'd like to do with the candles or?
You know what? I would just like to ask everyone to just think about how you honored your pet today, and thank you for coming, and just blow out your candle and thank your beloved pet for being with you as well.
That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I hope you have a great holiday, and I'm looking forward to swimming with Oso again. And
Yay.
everybody that's been with us today, thank you so much for joining us. And I know this is not an easy time of year and not an easy topic, but we hope that we've been helpful and that we've given you some guidance on how to get through the holiday and all of the special events that are yet to come. So thank you everyone so much. We really appreciate you being here. And take care of yourself and please grieve well and be well. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll talk to you later.